With David Petraeus taking his place in the Adultery Hall of Fame just down the hall from John Edwards and around the corner from Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, it's time for a little sex talk here on The Last Word. Let's first of all rewrite the concept of marital fidelity. What most people mean by the term fidelity is actually sexual exclusivity. Consider the marriage of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Now, nothing I'm about to say about their marriage is fact. We can never really know the facts about anyone else's marriage. But what I'm going to say, I think, is reasonable supposition based on the available external evidence. I think the Clinton marriage is full of love. Bill for Hillary, Hillary for Bill, both of them for Chelsea, Chelsea for them. I think the Clinton marriage is stable, solid. I think Bill and Hillary Clinton are fully committed to their marriage, to each other, and always have been. I think the Clinton marriage is simply a good marriage. I think the Clinton marriage works. It works for them, and it does not include sexual exclusivity. It is, in that sense, a thoroughly modern marriage or a thoroughly traditional French marriage. To be faithful is something much larger than sexual exclusivity. Bill Clinton is a faithful family man. He is a faithful father to his daughter. And yes, he is a faithful husband to his wife, loyal to her, supportive of her, devoted to her, but he has not always been sexually exclusive to her. Bill and Hillary Clinton are both smart enough and loyal enough to each other and love each other enough to realize that the sexual exclusivity issue was never going to be a big enough problem to end their marriage. Because they don't define marital fidelity as simply sexual exclusivity. And they're not the only ones. The Clintons obviously judge marital fidelity to be something much bigger than that, and their judgment has been proven right. So the Petraeus affair is not about infidelity. It is about sexual exclusivity. It is about the consequences of the bad judgments that David Petraeus made in his relationship with Paula Broadwell and others in the story. No adult in the 21st century should be shocked that either David Petraeus or Paula Broadwell had sex outside of their marriage. It happens. It happens all the time. And no adult in the 21st century should presume to guess how it happened in this case. You should leave the guessing to the adults of the 18th century, some of whom, for some strange reason, are still around.
This is he's a lieutenant colonel. She is an extremely good-looking woman. She is a marathon runner. She'd run Ironman triathlons, and so she's out running with him, and she's writing a biography. And I think the term is propinquity. And there was a lot of propinquity going on.
I think a lot is the word we want to focus on.
And, well, I mean, who knows? I mean, the man's off in a foreign land, and he's lonely, and here's a good-looking lady throwing herself at him. I mean, it's he's a man.
Sounds like the Viagra kicked in right before the show. Yes, David Petraeus is a man, and he was also the head of the CIA, and the only relevant question that should make us ask is, what does this tell us about his judgment, since his job relied so heavily on his judgment? The 1950s spy novel notion that extramarital sex somehow could make Petraeus subject to blackmail is utterly childish. The judgment issue is the only one worth examining here, and what we see at every stage of this story is David Petraeus's judgment is terrible. His terrible judgment is not about the sex. It's about the emails about the sex. General Petraeus engaged in risky behavior involving his email, and he did it with a person who engaged in even more risky behavior with her email. His bad judgment was that he and she could keep their little secret. She made the stunningly intemperate decision of thinking she could get away with sending angry emails to another woman about General Petraeus. And that led us down a trail of a series of terrible judgments made by David Petraeus. While he was stationed in Florida, General Petraeus welcomed into his life some military groupies, a local doctor, and his wife, Jill Kelly, and her very troubled sister. Generals, senators, congressmen, movie stars, etc., all have people who crave a place in their entourages. They have to be very careful of these people. Jill Kelly and her sister were both graduates of a reality TV show before they met David Petraeus. They obviously loved throwing around their association with the general, and that alone should have been reason enough for General Petraeus and General John Allen to keep them at very long distances. Jill Kelly and her husband had bankrupted a cancer charity that they created after spending virtually all of the money on themselves instead of on cancer research. That's who Generals Petraeus and Allen had the very bad judgment to befriend so closely. They both wrote breathtakingly stupid and pointless letters to a judge on behalf of Jill Kelly's sister, who was in a custody battle over her son. They obviously did not know that Jill Kelly's sister had violated many court orders in that case. She had renamed her son without telling his father. She had moved with her son to Florida from Washington, D.C. without permission. And court records also show she didn't correct her son when the boy began to call her sister's husband Dad. Of course, the judge ignored the general's silly letters, but the generals did not have the good judgment to know that their silly letters would be ignored by a judge. Is David Petraeus the first high-ranking general to have an affair? General and President Dwight Eisenhower could tell you that no, he isn't. Is David Petraeus the first CIA director to have an affair? Surely he isn't. But what he is a four-star general and a CIA director who had the profoundly bad judgment to engage in the kind of affair that got wildly out of control and left hard drives full of proof of the affair. And so the Petraeus affair is not about the sex. And I know whenever people say it's not about the sex, it is about the sex. But for me, it is not about the sex. I mean it. We should look at the Petraeus affair as a useful window, perhaps not the only window, but a useful window into the man's judgment, and everything we see through that window is a series of very reckless judgments. One good thing about the Petraeus affair is that he is finally getting some balanced coverage in the news media. Time magazine, which has previously been as worshipful of General Petraeus as the rest of the media, has this in the middle of its Petraeus affair cover story. Petraeus is a remarkable piece of fiction created and promoted by neocons in government, the media, and academia, argues Douglas McGregor, an outspoken retired Army colonel. How does an officer with no personal experience of direct fire combat in Panama or Desert Storm become a division commander? And so, in the space of a few days, David Petraeus has gone from being a remarkable piece of fiction to a bumbling character in an unremarkable soap opera. This is not a story about sex. It is a story about judgment. It is a story about a man's judgment, a man who had people's lives in his hands as a general and as CIA director. The question President Obama had to answer for himself last week was how much bad judgment was he willing to tolerate in his CIA director? And President Obama's answer was none.